I was once a refugee, a child refugee in the custody of the UN. I fled the Rwandan genocide and the Rwandan civil war in 1994. Many of the people I fled with were not as fortunate as I was to end up in a third country. Many are still in places like the Congo or Uganda or Tanzania or Zambia and many others in the world where they're still living in refugee camps. Those who remained in the Congo were subsequently bombed by the government of Rwanda when they invaded the Congo in 1996. Many of those have had children, and their children are now refugees. Surprisingly, the United Nations is forcing those refugees to return to Rwanda by ending the refugee status for those refugees. Mind you, those refugees walked hundreds, sometimes over 1,000 miles to get away from the onslaught of the Rwandan troops who were pursuing them in the forest in the Congo. And this is the same country that the UN is saying it's safe for them to return to. Surprisingly, the UN is putting in place this cessation clause, knowing that in October 2017, the UN Committee Against Torture was in Rwanda and stopped its operation there because the Rwandan government was obstructing their investigation, would not let them talk to people and determine whether there is indeed torture in Rwanda. However, just before that, again, still in September-October timeframe 2017, Human Rights Watch released a report demonstrating that the Rwandan government tortures its citizens. People are electrocuted, there is simulation of death, people are beaten, people are starved. There are many things that are done to Rwandan people that are torture. Yet the UN is saying it's safe for Rwandan refugees who remember not long ago being bombed in the Congolese forest, in the Congolese jungles, to return to that country. They have chosen to remain in places where they have no classrooms. The children are studying outside, but they would rather be in a place like that where the conditions are so difficult to live in than go back to Rwanda because it is not safe. The Rwandan government has pursued some of the refugees and brought them back to Rwanda by force. It has pursued some of the refugees and abducted them back to Rwanda from refugee camps or from the countries that they have fled to. So these refugees remember all of this, and the UN is still saying, we will not give you protection, we will not recognize you as refugees, and so you must return to Rwanda. And this is something that the UN should reconsider. The UN should stop this cessation clause for Rwanda and make sure that there's no torture in Rwanda. The refugees are ready to return to Rwanda because many would, by their own choice, return if they thought that the place was safe for them, but they don't feel safe going back to Rwanda. The government of Rwanda is so repressive. They have put thousands of their critics in prison, and they consider anyone that's still a refugee outside of Rwanda someone that is either a critic, or they accuse them of crimes, which is of course untrue, but it's the type of fear that the people have is very founded because many of the refugees who have either been returned by force and able to get away have gotten away again. Many of the thousands of refugees who were returned from the Congo when Rwanda invaded the Congo ended up running away again. Many people in Rwanda are trying to flee the country. 150,000 people are threatened today by famine, and others are fleeing repression and they are fleeing to neighboring countries. So how can the UN say it's safe to return, knowing that even the people inside of the country are trying to escape? The mapping report, the UN mapping report on the Democratic Republic of Congo showed that the government of Rwanda may have committed genocide against those refugees. 200,000 of those refugees died at the hands during the attack of the Rwandan troops into the Congo. Yet the UN is still saying that it's okay for those refugees who still remember what happened to return to Rwanda. And this is something that the UN should reconsider. The UN should stop the cessation clause for Rwanda and allow Rwandan refugees to remain with their refugee status until the conditions in the country are safe for everybody to live in. Knowing all of the repression there is in Rwanda, knowing the torture against critics of the government, knowing the extrajudicial killings of Rwandan people, it is not a safe place for Rwandan refugees to go. And that is why many of them choose to remain in horrible conditions instead of returning to Rwanda. And the UN should reconsider the decision to send the refugees, the Rwandan refugees, home, because that is essentially signing their death certificate, at least for many of them.